Hello. Welcome. So happy to have you back. Today we're going to be having a little bit of a chat about my top 10 favourite reads of 2023. I absolutely love these videos. I love watching them. I really enjoyed making one last year. And when I say I have watched literally 250 of them this year, I have. I won't tell you exactly how I know the numbers apart from it will be used in an upcoming video, so get excited. Just a quick disclaimer for those of you who don't spend a lot of time on the bookish side of the internet. When I'm talking about my favourite reads of 2023, when I'm talking about the best books, I'm not talking specifically about books that came out in 2023. They can have come out in any single year, and then I have just happened to read them this year. Otherwise it would be a bit unfair for like Charles Dickens, who he didn't have booktube in his time. Where are people going to spread the love for him at the end of the year? I'm joking, there's no Charles Dickens on this list. I didn't actually read any this year. I don't think I've ever read a book by Charles Dickens. I must have done. Maybe that's a goal for 2024. I read 75 books in 2023. I think I'm going to do a video where I like quickly mention all of them and then sum them up in one sentence, just to kind of wrap up the whole year. I thought that would be nice, and maybe include some statistics and stuff because I love tracking my reading, because I feel like today we're saving this for the best of the best. We're not going to talk about the stats any more than the fact that I read 75. I've seen loads and loads and loads of people make top 23 of 2023 videos, and I thought I could have done that because I did have a good reading year and I could have definitely been happy talking to you about 23 of my favourites this year, but I thought I'd keep it exclusive, essentially. If I'd have included like the next 13 down the list, it would have got into some books that I really enjoyed but I thought there were quite big problems with. Whereas with this list, while there might be problems, I might not consider them perfect, they had that feeling to me that made me feel like they deserved to be here. So without further ado, these are the top 10 books that I read in 2023. In 10th place, I am ranking them. I really enjoy ranking things. We have a book that is very, very different to my normal taste in reading. If you've just clicked on this video now and you've never seen me before, hello, first of all. This book does not represent my reading in the slightest. It was quite far out of my comfort zone, and why did I pick it up? I was up in Manchester and I'd finished the book that I'd taken on the train up, and I was like, I'm gonna need something to read on the way down because being on the train is my primary reading time. So me and my friend went into this bookshop, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was so cute. And I just sort of walked in and like read the back of this book and was like, something about this book is calling to me and I cannot put my finger on it. So this book is Things We Say in the Dark by Kirsty Logan, and it is a short story collection of horror stories. I never really read short story collections, and I absolutely never read horror. I am one of the most easily scared people on the planet. I can't watch horror movies at all. My boyfriend tried to make me watch Talk to Me. I watched the first 10 minutes and I was almost in tears. But I decided to pick this one up anyway, and it was quite scary, but I feel like reading horror is a different experience to watching horror. So all of these stories are connected around female experiences, essentially, and it plays on a lot of women's fears and turns them into a reality to make a horror story. So for example, there's one that links to pregnancy where she's growing like the spawn of the devil inside her, and she ends up being pregnant for ages, and then like it tries to get, it's really quite disturbing. There's seances and haunted houses and kidnappings, and then like sleepovers with your friends. Yeah, and all of them are sort of linked by feminist horror. I wonder if that's a genre, feminist horror. And while all of these stories are not connected in the slightest, they're all different characters and everything. The premise of the book is that it's a book within a book, and it is a woman sat alone in a cottage in Norway or somewhere, and she's writing the stories. We get these little snippets from her in between stories, and they're only like a couple of paragraphs long, but we realise that we're kind of catching up with her in terms of time. At the start, she's talking about these stories like it's a book she published years ago, and then as we move throughout the stories, it begins to turn into present tense, and she's having some creepy things happen to her as well. I definitely really appreciated having that. It felt like a little bridge for me into short stories because there was an overarching plot to the whole thing, and since then I've been able to read more short stories, so thank you very much, Kirsty Logan. I just found this one so immersive and creepy and exciting, and I really enjoyed it. It opened my eyes to enjoying both horror and short stories, so it's on this list because it proved to me that it's good to step out of your comfort zone every once in a while. So number 9 on this list is technically another horror. And I know I just said that I don't read horror, I know I just said that. And actually I did read this one months after Things We Say in the Dark, so maybe I picked it up because I enjoyed that one. But it does have a bright pink cover, so it didn't really make me think So this book is Bunny by Mona Awad. This one came out in 2019 and I've definitely seen it in a lot of places on the internet. I think that's probably why I picked it up. So Bunny follows a girl who's at a literature writing, creative writing class. Her course doesn't really do lectures or anything. They kind of revolve around these writing classes where each person in the class brings in a bit of a story they've written and then they all share together essentially. So our main character Samantha is kind of the odd one out in the class. It's a very, very small class and everyone else is kind of in this clique. The title of this book comes from the fact that they constantly refer to each other as Bunny. They'll say things like, "I love you, Bunny, you did such a good job, Bunny, I love your essay, Bunny." One day Samantha is invited by the bunnies to go and hang out with them after school and it gets weird. This is one of those fever dream-esque stories where you're not quite sure if the events are happening or if all the characters are just really, really high, essentially. The characters in this book were so interesting. The way that she wrote about them, it's like one of those I want to look, but I don't want to look, but I want to look, but I shouldn't look. This book is one of the most bizarre things I've ever read. It's so out there and so wacky, but I really felt it when it started to go into these emotional moments. I didn't feel too separated from it because of the bizarreness. I really enjoyed Mona Awad's writing, so I'm definitely going to pick up All's Well by her. Next up, we have quite a popular one that did come out this year and I have seen it on many people's lists, and that is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is actually my first R.F. Kuang. I got both this and Babel for Christmas, but Yellowface is being used in an upcoming video, so that's why I read that one first, and I'm so excited for Babel now. Yellowface is the story of Juniper Haywood, who is a pretty average author. She doesn't have that much traction. Her debut kind of flopped. She doesn't like her editor or her team and she is insanely jealous of her friend Athena. June and Athena went to university together, and when June's career was kind of flopping, Athena's was taking off. So when Athena chokes and dies one night and leaves behind a manuscript to a new novel that no one else has seen before, June decides to take it and publish it in her own name. We're reading this whole novel in first person from June's perspective and it is kind of mental being inside her head. The manuscript that she steals focuses on a specific part of Chinese history in World War I that was incredibly traumatic. June is a white author and her middle name is Song, so she decides to publish the book under Juniper Song, which is a name that deliberately sounds a little bit more racially ambiguous than June Haywood. June does a lot of things like this throughout the book. It's not one if you want to be able to read comfortably, it's one where you're kind of biting your nails and you're flinching every time she does anything. But it was genuinely an amazing, amazing read. I really had that 5-star feeling the whole way through. I couldn't put it down. There's a little bit of a thriller aspect, not massively. If that's going to turn you away from it, then don't worry. Don't let it affect your decision on reading this, but it's enough to build up that momentum and not make you want to put the book down. As I mentioned earlier, I did read Yellowface for a specific video and that'll be coming out in maybe like a month-ish, and I did vlog reading it for that video, so if you want to see my thoughts like as I go through, then I will link that below when it comes out, or you can just turn the notification bell on. I absolutely loved this book. I think I started it about 5 PM on Boxing Day and then I finished it by 10 AM the next day. It is 100% worth the hype that it gets and I'm so excited to read more by R.F. Kuang. Book 7 is another one that I'm sure needs no introduction. Since it came out in 2022, it's been absolutely dominating the internet, and this is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Just in case you haven't heard about this book at all, we are following the characters of Sam and Sadie, who meet in a games room of a hotel when Sadie's visiting her sister and Sam has just like broken his foot and lost his mum in a car crash. They bond over their love for gaming and are then inseparable until they have a bit of a falling out. And then 8 years later, they see each other in a train station and they begin to start that friendship again. It sounds like the most simple plot in the entire world, but oh my goodness, the whirlwind of emotions that this book takes you on. You do not need to be a massive fan or particularly knowledgeable about gaming to get into this book. I play The Sims 4, that's the extent of my gaming ability. I suppose it's kind of like in Carrie Sato's back, like you don't need to be a tennis fan for that, but it might be something that draws you to the book if you are. It is about family, it is about friendships, it's about success and failure and creativity that knows no bounds. I just cannot think of a single person that I know that wouldn't feel a softness towards this story. It might not be their favourite story in the entire world, but they would have a soft spot for this book because it is just so special. Genuinely one of the most stunning books I've ever read, and oh my goodness, I sobbed. If you've read the book, you know exactly when I've sobbed. I've talked about having popular books on this list before. This is the most basic option I could have gone for. This book went completely crazy and so popular about 5 years ago, and I ran into it January last year. And that book is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Yes, you can call me cliche. Yes, you can call me basic. This is a retelling of the story of Achilles and Patroclus. I never had that Greek mythology obsession era like a lot of people my age did when they were younger, probably because I never read or watched Percy Jackson. Madeline Miller writes in very beautiful lyrical text, and it is just gorgeous to read as long as you kind of care about what's happening. So it's quite hard to get into at the start. Oh my goodness, the payoff is worth it. As soon as you start reading, it's just gorgeous language and these lovely sentences, but you're not particularly invested in the characters, so I can see why you'd be deterred at first. And then Achilles shows up, and obviously as the reader, he's the title character, we're interested, and you can really feel how Patroclus starts to get a bit of a pull and a bit of a purpose as soon as he enters. If you know anything about this book or the myth, you'll know that it's quite sad. That was just a warning. I don't really have anything else to say on that topic, to be fair, that was just a warning. Okay, I'm gonna need to move on quickly because I just talked about 2 books that really messed with my emotions. Please read The Song of Achilles. There is so much hype there for a reason. I know that sometimes things get overhyped. I know that sometimes TikTok books are just rubbish. I did also read Circe, and I thought I was gonna massively prefer that one. I didn't. I preferred Song of Achilles, but I did enjoy Circe. I also gave it 5 stars. In 5th place, we've got the only fantasy book in this list. And fantasy was like one of my biggest genres in 2023, but this book clearly had a bit of an edge over the others for me, and this is The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. I didn't love The Cruel Prince when I read it. I was gonna say when I first read it, I've only read it once. I thought it was a bit high school drama set in this fantasy world, and I really enjoyed the world, but like they were just kind of acting a bit like high school kids and, oh, you stole my boyfriend and things like that. I don't know, it was a bit like, okay, are we set in a high school or are we set in a fairy universe? Considering the whole story is like folklore crossed with contemporary, it just edged way too much on the contemporary side for me. So I was like, fine through The Cruel Prince. I didn't really care about it. I liked the world, but I didn't particularly care any more than that. And then it got to that last scene. So this year I read The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing. I loved them so much. I thought each one got better and better. So then when The Stolen Heir came out, I was like, I have to get this. I don't care that it's a hardback. I generally don't like buying hardbacks, but I was like, I have to get it. I can't wait. I cannot wait. So The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing are in the Folk of the Air trilogy, and that is around Jude. We're following Jude and like the royal family and the heirs to the throne, and it's political fantasy like in the high courts with all the knights and the sieging and the sabotaging. And then in The Stolen Heir, which comes after the Folk of the Air trilogy, we are completely removed from all of the like royalty and the high courts, and we are in essentially the slums of this world. We're following Ren, who is a minor character in The Queen of Nothing, and she has left the world of the fairies because her situation got very dangerous, and she is basically hiding out in bins in the human world and interacting with all of the creatures that are on that edge of fairy world and the human world. She has essentially an adventure, a quest proposition to her by Oak, who is one of Jude's little brothers. Everything links up with the characters. Then we follow this little crew on their quest through fairyland. I absolutely loved it in The Folk of the Air when we were in the high courts with all of the political fantasy, but what I loved more is that Holly Black completely took us away from that for this series, and we were travelling through all of these outer cities with all of these fairy creatures that were really scheming. I loved it. I loved that Holly Black like fleshed out all of these areas, like the Court of Teeth that we'd heard about but we hadn't visited, and we could go there and see how dark and desolate it was. I just thought it was brilliant. Plot wise, I did guess the plot twist. I'm not going to speak too much on it because I think if you don't guess it, it'd be the best thing ever, but it was still the best thing ever being proven right. I just want more books now. I want more duologies and series set in different areas of this same world. I loved it. I loved Holly Black's writing. I loved the characters. I loved the plot. I loved everything about it. Book number 4, the one that just missed out on the top 3. This book I have talked about before on my channel, and it deserves to be talked about again. So I'm going to talk about it again. This is one of them that I read in my book buying ban challenge on TikTok, and it got to the point in the challenge where I was like, I just want to get through this so I can buy more books, because there's books I want to read that are coming out and I want to buy them, so I need to get through this. So I'm going to pick up some short books on my shelf. I'm going to find as many short books as I can. And the shortest one I could find at the time was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is 188 pages, and it is 188 pages of pure wonder. I Who Have Never Known Men is about a dystopian future in which we have 40 women that are trapped underground in a cage, and one of them is a young girl who's never seen or experienced life before this cage. One day the key is left in the lock and they are able to escape and explore the world in which they currently are in. I knew absolutely nothing going into this book other than what I've just told you now, and I think that is all I'm going to tell you. I think it's better if you go into this book based on the idea that someone has said to you, oh, I think you'd like this book, rather than you've heard loads about it and you think, I'm desperate to read this book because of the plot, the characters, etc, etc, etc. I think that the author of this book just can express humanity in a way that no other author I've ever read from can. The joy, the desperation, the experiences that they were sharing with each other were filled with this humanness. I think it might be the most impressive book that I've ever read. It absolutely floored me. So if you're looking for a short book that has a really big impact, I would 100% recommend you this one. With these top 3 books, I feel like it's quite dependent on how I'm feeling at the time of which one I'm going to rate higher than the others. At the moment, I'm just going with the way that my heart is telling me right now. So in 3rd place, my bronze award for 2023, we have Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Oh my god, this book! When I was younger, my mum found this list of like 100 books that you should read as a teenager, and there were a lot of books on there that were probably a little bit too old for me at the time because I was 12. I mean, there were things like 1984 on there, which I genuinely couldn't finish and was traumatised. I was a traumatised 12-year-old after that book. I still need to get around to it at some point. This book was on that list and I read it at 12 or 13, and I've never truly forgotten about it since. My boyfriend describes my taste in media as like cozy but mournful, or mournful coziness, and I think this book was the first thing I ever interacted with that gave me that feeling, and that's why I think I felt so impacted by it at that time and why I feel so connected to it. Never Let Me Go is the story of Kathy, who is a carer looking back on her life, particularly the years that she spent at her boarding school. About 50% of the time is spent at this boarding school, and you kind of understand that there's something not quite normal happening. None of the children ever leave to go visit family or anything. They're not allowed any contact with the outside world. There's strange people that come in and like look at their artwork and things. There's something that's a little bit off about the whole experience. And then as they leave the school, they go into training to be carers, which is the path that they were always going to take. This book is just written in the most unexplainably beautiful way. You feel like you're watching through an old video camera or looking at vintage photographs of her childhood. It almost feels like a muted watercolour painting. I do not know how to describe Ishiguro's writing. I just can't do it. I've also read Clara in the Sun by him, but I love that one nowhere near as much as I love Never Let Me Go. The whole book is essentially an exploration about how we treat those that are different than us, that need more help, that are more vulnerable, and how even those who are in favour of supporting more vulnerable people will very happily turn a blind eye when the newspapers change their topics. It is just the definition of the word bittersweet. Moving swiftly on to my 2nd favourite book of 2023, I have The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I've realised that maybe I like books that break my heart. The marriage portrait starts with Lucrezia, who is the young wife of a very important Italian duke. She's sat across from him at dinner and she realises that he is going to kill her and there's nothing that she can do about it. We then go into a split timeline kind of deal where we're following Lucrezia grow up and how she's got to be this 15-year-old wife to this 40-year-old Italian duke, and then in like the present she's trying to avoid being murdered by him. This is an insanely gripping tale of girlhood transitioning into womanhood, where she has no bodily autonomy, no rights of her own. Her only job is to provide children, and she can't do that. All of the chapters when she's younger are just so emotional because you see her as this child that loves art, that loves life, and is so interested in the world around her, but you know ultimately where she's going to end up. There's this great weight of helplessness that weighs you down throughout the novel that I suppose she would have felt like, and all the young girls that were married off to men 4 times their age would have felt like at the time. I loved every second of this story. I thought all of the side characters were fully fleshed out and felt really vivid and human. There's so much heart in this book, so much care and so much attention to detail, and I just applaud you, Maggie O'Farrell. I absolutely applaud you. And then finally, my top spot, my gold award, and my favourite book of 2023 goes to Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I did say that I think these books can be jumbled around a bit. These top 3 are all incredible and it depends on the day, it depends on how I'm feeling that which one goes in the top spot. But Everything I Know About Love stared into my soul and said, this is what you need to read right now, right this moment, this is what you need, and I loved it. Dolly Alderton is a British journalist, columnist from London who is the love of my life. Now she's the love of my life. Everything I Know About Love has obviously a focus on love and relationships, whether they be romantic, whether they be friendship, or even workplace at sometimes, but it's also a story about just being a girl and growing into a woman, and I cried so many times. It was the most real thing that I've ever read. I think I actually might be tearing up right now. She speaks very honestly about experiences that she's been through, particularly therapy. Like the way she talked about therapy really hit me. She has this way of talking about tough things that happened to her in a really beautiful way. She discussed grieving a friend in the most soul healing way I think I've ever read anyone talk about grief. I just feel like every single woman should read this book. Those were my top 10 books. Those were the best of the best. They were my absolute favourites of 2023. I'm very excited for this year of reading. I'm going to try and branch out into new styles, and I think my goal for the year is 85 books at the moment. As always, I'm going to sit here and promise that I'm going to be posting more this year. I don't know if I actually will, but I'll give it a good shot. Hopefully. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Goodbye. In the storm. I hate living in London.